Before we jump into today's story, drop a quick comment to say hi, tell me your name, where you're watching from, and let me know if you're sticking around till the end. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. Alright, let's get into the story. My name is Jonathan Reed. I'm 61 years old, and if you ask my neighbors, they'll tell you I look like one of those men who time forgot, a little behind the times, comfortable in clothes from another decade, and still clutching an old smartphone that most kids today would call an antique. I live in Seattle, Washington, a city that constantly reinvents itself, racing forward with software companies, electric cars, AI research labs, billion-dollar startups, you name it. But me? I've never cared about appearances. I never cared about having the latest gadgets, the freshest sneakers, or the trendiest coffee shops. I suppose some of that rubbed my son the wrong way. Nathan, my only child, is 22 now. He's smart, ambitious, and like many young Americans today, obsessed with technology, clout, and the idea of making it big. To him, success is measured by what car you drive, which phone you hold, and how many people follow you online. To me, success is quieter. Less about noise and more about building something that lasts. But that difference between us is where this story begins. It was one evening last winter. Nathan had stopped by my house after weeks of being too busy with friends, college, and his side projects. I had been keeping track of stocks on my old iPhone 6, yes, one of those small ones with a home button, a cracked screen covered with a phone protector I'd never bothered to replace. Dad, Nathan burst out laughing the moment he saw it. Are you seriously still using that brick? My God, it's like walking around with a museum exhibit. He pulled out his own phone, one of those flashy foldable models that had just come out, worth about $2,000, and waved it in my face. This is the future, Dad. And you're stuck in the past. No wonder you don't get how the world works anymore. Now, I'm not a man to get offended easily. I've been called worse things by sharper tongues. Still, that sting, that little jab from my own son, lodged somewhere deep inside me. Not because he was wrong about the phone, but because he had no idea what I carried with me every day. He thought my old, scratch device was a symbol of weakness, when in fact, it had been the tool that helped me build an empire he didn't even know existed. That night, as Nathan's laughter echoed in my ears long after he left, I made a decision. It was time for my son to see the truth. It was time for him to understand not just the value of technology, but the value of vision. And so began the week that would change everything, the week when a simple joke about an old phone turned into the revelation of a company worth millions. The morning after Nathan mocked me, I sat in my study with a cup of black coffee, staring at that so-called brick phone resting on my desk. Its battery barely held a charge anymore, the corners were chipped, and the screen had a long scar running diagonally across it. But to me, that phone wasn't junk. It was history. It was memory. It was legacy. You see, 15 years ago, I wasn't just an ordinary man with a slow phone. I was an engineer working at a mid-level tech company in downtown Seattle. Back then, smartphones were only beginning to shape the world. Most people used them for calls, texts, or maybe some clunky apps. But they called me eccentric, I believed something else. That phones would soon become the wallet, the mirror, the office, and the key to human life. And so, quietly, away from even my family, I began developing something. Not a phone itself, but a financial platform, a way to bring together payments, savings, small investments, and digital security into one seamless experience. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't glamorous. But it worked. Slowly, brick by brick, code by code, I built it with 2 colleagues who believed in me. That phone Nathan mocked? That was the very device where the prototype was born. The first version of the app was coded, tested, and refined within its aging circuits. Back then, I was so busy working late nights that I missed many of Nathan's Little League games, many of his birthdays, many evenings tucking him into bed. He only remembers my absences. He doesn't see that the absences had purpose. Our company, quiet, unnamed for years, grew steadily. By the time Nathan was in high school, we had signed contracts with banks. By the time he entered college, venture capitalists came knocking. And yet, I never boasted. Never showed him the other phone, the business phone, where quarterly reports stacked up, where millions flowed in and out like invisible tides. To him, I was just dad with the old iPhone 6. That week, after his laughter, I decided something. I was done keeping it all in the shadows. Parents shouldn't have to shout about their worth, but sometimes one revelation can reshape a child's entire view of you. So, I called him. "Nathan," I said over the crackling line of my ancient device, "come by the office tomorrow. I want to show you something." He snorted on the other end. "What office? You mean your study?" "Dad, I've got classes." "No, son," I said calmly. "Not the house. My other office. The one at Westlake Tower." There was silence. Then, disbelief. "You have an office?" "Yes." "Tomorrow morning," I replied. 9 sharp. "Don't be late." When I hung up, I smiled to myself. Nathan had no idea what was coming. If he thought my old phone was the punchline to a joke, he was about to discover it was the beginning of a fortune. The next morning, Seattle was wrapped in its usual gray mist, the kind of damp, heavy air that makes the city feel like it's floating half inside a dream. I woke up early, put on a navy blue blazer I hadn't worn in years, and slipped that old phone into my pocket. I wasn't nervous, not exactly. More curious. Curious to see the look on my son's face when the curtain finally pulled back. At exactly 8:47 a.m., Nathan pulled up to my driveway in his electric car, music thumping so loud I could hear the bass through the windows. He stepped out, his hair styled perfectly, wearing sneakers that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. He gave me a half smile, the kind teenagers give their parents when they're too cool to care. "All right, Dad," he said, tugging his jacket tighter. "Let's see this office of yours. Should I expect coffee and donuts in the lobby? Or is it just you and a desk in some rented cube?" "You'll see," I replied simply, and drove us both into the city. Westlake Tower rose above the skyline like a steel and glass sentinel. Nathan had been downtown plenty of times before, but he'd never followed me inside this particular building. As I parked below and led him up to the elevators, I saw his smirk falter just slightly. When the doors opened onto the 32nd floor, he froze. The space exploded with activity, rows of sleek desks, glowing monitors, teams of engineers typing furiously, designers brainstorming in glass-walled rooms, analysts pacing and muttering numbers. Screens on the walls displayed live market data, servers, charts climbing and dropping with waves of activity. "Wah," Nathan's voice caught. His sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. "What is this?" I walked him toward the wide glass window overlooking downtown Seattle. Behind us, a young woman in professional dress approached and said, "Good morning, Mr. Reed. The quarterly brief is ready whenever you are." Nathan turned his head so fast I thought his neck might snap. "Wait, Mr. Reed? They mean you?" I chuckled. "Who else?" We stepped inside the conference room, long oak table, screens glowing, folders neatly arranged. The company logo was etched on the glass wall, Nova Pay Systems. "This," I told Nathan, gesturing across the floor, "is your father's little office." His jaw practically hit the table. I pulled out one of the glossy booklets and slid it across to him. On the cover, it listed our valuation, current worth, $280 million, yearly forecast, climbing higher. His hands trembled as he flipped through pages with graphs, growth trends, partnerships with names like Chase and Wells Fargo. "You own this?" he whispered. "I built it," I corrected smoothly. "Brick by brick. Code by code. Long before you thought Snapchat stocks were the future. Long before you laughed at this old phone." I tapped the device in my pocket. This, that you mocked, was the very foundation on which NovaPay was designed. Nathan blinked, wordless. The kid who always had a sarcastic reply suddenly had nothing at all to say. "Tomorrow," I added firmly, "you'll meet the executive team. If you're interested, you can start learning. But you'll need more than flashy gadgets and sneakers to earn a seat at this table, Nathan. Here, we build things that last." For the first time in years, my son looked at me not like a man behind the times, but like someone he couldn't quite figure out. Someone he might even admire. The next morning, when Nathan walked into the office again, his swagger was gone. He didn't wear his usual flashy sneakers or oversized jacket. Instead, he dressed simply: jeans, a plain shirt, and a notebook clutched in his hands like he was about to attend his first day of school. I noticed. That shift mattered. "Good," I said with a small nod. "You're learning already. Subtlety counts, especially here. Dressing for attention in the wrong room makes people think you're hiding in the glitter because you've got no gold beneath it." He didn't argue. For Nathan, that was progress. I led him around NovaPay's headquarters, introducing him to people. Engineers designing systems more secure than banks. Analysts mapping the economy 5 years into the future. Designers figuring out how to make things so intuitive a child could use them. I made sure he saw everything. Finally, I brought him into the smaller strategy room, where the walls were lined not with screens but with handwritten goals I had scrawled myself years ago. Some were crossed out, others updated, one or two still circled in red marker. "This is where it started," I told him. "This room right here, with me and 2 colleagues. The furniture was secondhand, the heating broke half the time, and we ate canned soup between coding marathons. Everyone laughed at us. Called us crazy. Called me outdated." Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Dad," he began, but I raised my hand. "No, I want you to listen. What you mock is old-fashioned, my strengths, my patience, my refusal to chase things just because they're trendy. That's how I built NovaPay. The world obsesses over the newest phone, the newest car, the newest distraction. But when you're chasing what's new, son, you miss the chance to build something that lasts. Do you understand?" Nathan looked down at his notebook. His pen hovered, then finally began scratching across the page. "Yes," he whispered. I leaned back in my chair. "Good. Then here's your first lesson. Knowing you're the son of the founder won't mean anything here. The employees don't need another boss's kid walking around pretending he's important. If you want to inherit this, you'll start from the ground floor. Entry-level training. Same as any other recruit." He blinked. "You mean like answering calls? Testing systems?" "Yes," I said. "Grunt work builds humility. Humility builds respect. And respect, if you're lucky, builds legacy." Nathan's lips parted as though he might argue, but then he only nodded. In his eyes, I no longer saw the boy who sneered at my cracked phone. I saw a young man standing at the gates of something vast, something he hadn't believed existed until yesterday. And for the first time in years, I felt hopeful. The mocking was gone. He was listening. But listening was only the beginning. The real test had yet to come. The following Monday, Nathan officially began his first job at NovaPay. I didn't give him a corner office, nor did I announce him as my son to the broader staff. Only the executive team knew. To everyone else, he was just Nathan Reed, new trainee. And so, he was placed in customer support, where every complaint lands first, raw and unpolished. From my window upstairs, I could see him through the glass walls of the department. He sat hunched at a small desk with a simple headset, responding to emails, trying to soothe frustrated voices on the phone. "Excuse me, sir," one customer snapped over the line as I passed by that first morning, "why hasn't my transaction cleared yet?" "This is outrageous." I could see Nathan's temples pulse. He wasn't used to being spoken to that way. That night, he came into my office with exhaustion painted across his face. "Dad, they treat us like garbage," he muttered, dropping heavily into a chair. "Half the customers yell, half don't understand what we're even offering, and the other half think we're trying to scam them. I've been insulted 20 times today." 20. I leaned back in my chair. "And did you lose your temper?" He hesitated. "No." "Good. Then you're learning." I smiled faintly. "Son, if you ever think running a company is about million-dollar dinners and photo ops, you'll fail before you even start. It's about patience with people who don't understand, and dignity in the face of insult. If you can't survive at the bottom, you won't last a day at the top." Nathan didn't reply. But the next morning, he came in early. Over the weeks, I watched him change. At first, he sulked. Then, slowly, he began to greet coworkers genuinely. He asked questions. He took notes on repeat complaints. And after a month, he presented me with a handwritten document. "Dad," he said, placing it on my desk, "I noticed our most common issue is delayed small transactions. I think we can streamline the processing code to shave seconds off per trade. I don't know the coding side yet, but I mapped the patterns." I picked up the paper. It wasn't perfect, but it was brilliant thinking for a trainee. I felt a warmth in my chest that paperwork and quarterly growth could never give me. Perhaps the boy who laughed at my old phone was beginning to understand what it had truly built. But I knew more tests were ahead. Because inheritance isn't just about skill, it's about character. And Nathan's greatest test was just around the corner. It was about 3 months into Nathan's work at NovaPay when his first real test arrived, unplanned, unannounced, the way life always sends them. One of our mid-level managers, a sharp young man named Carter, was leading an initiative to attract college students to our payment platform. On paper, it looked good: fun marketing, social media buzz, and trendy partnerships. But Nathan, working in customer support, noticed something deeper. He came to me after hours, notebook in hand. "Dad," he said, "do you know Carter's program gives out sign-up bonuses that, well, they're kind of misleading? The ad says students get $50 instantly, but in reality, it's more like $30 after hidden fees. They don't realize it until later." I leaned back, studying his face. He was troubled. That was good. A heart that wrestled with dishonesty meant there was still hope for his integrity. "It's technically legal," I told him carefully. "Plenty of companies use those tactics. The question is, do you think it's right?" Nathan looked down at the floor. "No. It feels like cheating. They're college kids, Dad. Most of them are broke. They trust us, and if this is how we treat them, we'll lose them." I didn't smile, though inside, I wanted to. "Then, what will you do?" The next day, I stayed quiet as Nathan approached Carter himself. I watched through the glass as the two argued in hushed tones. Carter scoffed, waved a hand, tried to brush him off. "That's just business, kid," I saw him mouth. But Nathan stood firm. He even took it to the compliance officer, laying out the data, the feedback, the emails from upset students. By the week's end, we'd pulled the misleading campaign entirely. Was Carter thrilled? No. Did Nathan make enemies? Absolutely. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that Nathan had chosen integrity over convenience. That evening, he came into my office, looking nervous. "I might have made things awkward with Carter," he admitted, "but I didn't want to look the other way." Did I do the right thing? I folded my hands together and looked him square in the eye. "Son, if you can sleep at night without compromise, you did the right thing. Revenue can be rebuilt. Trust, once lost, is gone forever." The boy who once mocked me for an outdated phone had just proven something he himself didn't yet realize. He was no longer just my son, he was becoming my successor. But to inherit millions, he would still need to face a far greater storm. And it was coming faster than either of us could predict. The storm hit on a Wednesday. I remember it clearly because the morning had started so ordinary: coffee, meetings, the buzz of keyboards filling the office. And then, in a single hour, everything tilted. At 10:13 a.m., our servers began to slow. By 10:17, thousands of users across the country were reporting failed transactions. By 10:23, the company's name was all over Twitter and Reddit: NovaPay down. NovaPay lost my money. NovaPay is a fraud. Every CEO's nightmare. By 10:30, the conference room was packed: engineers, developers, compliance officers, PR managers, all frantically speaking over each other. I stood at the head of the table, calm but focused. Years of building had taught me that panic never fixes code. And then, against my expectation, Nathan spoke up. "Excuse me," his voice rang out, young, but steady. The room went quiet. Everyone turned. This was the intern to most of them, the founder's kid, barely cutting his teeth in customer support. He had no authority here. But Nathan didn't flinch. "I've been logging customer patterns for months," he continued, pulling out that battered notebook of his. He flipped to a page covered in charts and hand-drawn arrows. "Most of these complaints aren't new, they started weeks ago with microtransactions. The system isn't failing randomly, it's overloading at the same point in the process, batch-splitting transfers." Heads turned. Engineers leaned closer. "Check the server logs from 9 a.m., Nathan pressed. "I guarantee you'll find congestion right there." For a beat, silence. Then, one of the senior developers ran a quick test. His eyes widened. "He's right," the developer blurted. "Look, batch splitting is clogging memory. That's the choke point." Suddenly the room erupted in motion, but this time it wasn't chaos, it was direction. Engineers attacked the problem with laser focus. Within 40 minutes, systems were stabilizing. An hour later, NovaPay was back online. The crisis wasn't gone, but it had been contained. I watched the scene quietly, my son standing amidst seasoned professionals, his notebook still in hand. No longer a boy mocking my old phone. No longer the arrogant college kid chasing clout. In that moment, Nathan had become a leader. When the room finally settled, the CTO turned to me and said, "Jonathan, your son just saved us $500,000 in potential lawsuits and a public relations disaster." I didn't say a word. I only looked at Nathan, and saw in his face the flicker of pride, not for himself, but for the company, for what it meant, for what we had built. That was when I knew, the empire carved out of endless nights and scratched on screens might actually survive another generation. But Nathan's journey was not yet finished. For him to truly inherit this company worth millions, he still had to face his greatest test, the choice between ambition for power and loyalty to legacy. And that choice was closer than either of us realized. The crisis had passed, and Nathan's reputation in the company had quietly shifted. People no longer saw him as the founder's spoiled son. Whispers floated through the hallways, sharp mind, quick under pressure, maybe he's got what it takes. But success does not only bring respect, it attracts wolves. About 2 weeks after the server incident, Nathan came into my study at home late one evening. His face was pale, his jaw tighter than usual. He kept pacing the room until I finally set down my book. "Out with it, son," I said. "What's gnawing at you?" He stopped, pulled a glossy business card from his pocket, and laid it on the table. It belonged to Eclipse Capital Ventures, one of the most aggressive investment firms in Silicon Valley. Their name had shadowed us for years, offering buyouts, hostile proposals, always circling, always waiting for an opening. "They reached out to me," Nathan said quietly. "Not through the company. Directly." My chest tightened. "And what did they want?" He hesitated. They said if I partnered with them, I could modernize NovaPay faster. That with my ideas and their capital, I wouldn't have to wait behind your shadow. They even hinted at a seat on their board. They think I could be bigger than this. The words hit me like a dull knife. Nathan wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, they're offering shortcuts. Faster scaling. Personal recognition. They said with innovation and youth on my side, I shouldn't waste time serving as your trainee." I exhaled slowly, my hand resting on the arm of the chair. "Nathan, listen carefully. Eclipse Capital doesn't want to make you big. They want to hollow out what we've built and wear your face while they do it. You'd be a pawn, not a partner. They've destroyed more companies than they've helped." "But Dad," his voice cracked slightly. "Don't you see? All my life people saw me as your son and nothing more. For the first time, someone's telling me I can stand alone. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" I did. Oh, God, I did. I had been that young once, hungry, impatient, desperate to carve identity apart from my own father. And so, I didn't yell. I didn't lecture. Instead, I leaned forward and said, "Nathan, standing alone is easy. Any fool can run off chasing promises of glory. Real strength is choosing to stand with something greater than yourself. You think NovaPay overshadows you, but one day, you'll realize, it's brighter to guard a legacy than to burn it for quick light." He looked away. Torn. Conflicted. I knew, in that moment, the boy who once mocked my phone was standing on the edge of his defining choice. Would he betray the company for selfish pride, or would he remain loyal to something larger, something his old man had bled to build? Whatever he decided next, would write the chapter of his life. The meeting was set at a quiet, upscale cafe on the edge of South Lake Union. Nathan told me about it afterward. Though I had my ways of knowing before he spoke, I still had friends who kept me informed when predators circled. Eclipse Capital didn't send some junior manager. They sent their vice president himself, a man named Leonard Drake. I knew of him. Slick hair, perfect smile, a voice coated in oil that could slide into any crevice of ambition. Nathan arrived nervous, but Drake wasted no time. He ordered the most expensive coffee on the menu and leaned across the table. "Young man," Drake began smoothly, "you've already proven your mind. The server crisis? People are buzzing about it everywhere. But why wait years under your father's wing? With us, your name, your vision, your youth, you could launch a spin-off tomorrow. We'll fund you, market you, make you a star. In 5 years, Jonathan Reed's son won't be whispered about. You'll be Nathan Reed, the man who outgrew his father." Temptation. Packaged in velvet words. Nathan, bless him, stayed silent at first. He let Drake talk. And talk. And talk. Legacy is chains, Drake said finally, leaning closer. It ties you to the past. But innovation, that's wings. Fly with us, Nathan. Or, stay in your father's office, waiting for him to hand you scraps of an empire he refuses to modernize. That part stunned Nathan. I could see it in his eyes later when he recounted the story. That word, scraps. But then, something unexpected happened. Nathan didn't leap. He didn't bite. Instead, he pulled from his backpack the notebook I'd seen him scribble in for months. He opened it and slid it toward Drake. This, Nathan said, is what I've been working on under my father's guidance. Scalability models, transaction algorithms, customer behavior flows. He doesn't give me scraps. He gives me building blocks. And those aren't chains. They're roots. Without roots, wings don't matter, you crash. Drake's smile faltered for the first time. Nathan closed the notebook, stood, and looked the man in the eye. Tell your firm thank you, but I don't betray the hand that built the house just because someone outside thinks it looks old-fashioned. And with that, he walked away. When Nathan came home and told me the entire story, I didn't speak for a long time. I simply listened, watching my son grow up before my eyes. Finally, I said, "You've made your choice, Nathan. And I'm proud. You chose loyalty over vanity. That's harder to do than most men will ever know." He smiled then, small, genuine, the first I'd seen in years that wasn't laced with cocky bravado. In that smile, I realized the empire was safe. But more importantly, so was my son's soul. A week later, I called Nathan into my office, not the glass-walled conference space, but my private office, the one only a handful of people ever entered. It was late evening, the Seattle skyline glowing orange and gold as the sun dipped behind the water. The office was quieter than usual, the hum of computers silenced, employees long gone. Just father and son, the weight of years between us. On my desk sat a single folder. Inside it, more than numbers, more than titles, something far greater. Nathan entered cautiously. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Sit, son." For a moment, I simply studied him. Not the boy I once scolded for mocking my phone. Not the teenager who dismissed me as outdated. Not even the intern fumbling through his first week of customer complaints. No, before me now was a man tempered by trials, by crises, by choices that tested his soul. I slid the folder across the desk. He hesitated, then opened it. His brow furrowed as his eyes scanned the pages. Share certificates. Transfer clauses. Ownership structures. Slowly, his hand began to tremble. He looked up. "Dad, this is..." "Yes," I said softly. "It's the company." His lips parted, but no words came. "Not all at once," I continued. "I'm not stepping down yet. My hands are still steady, my mind still sharp. But this," I tapped the folder gently, "is the plan for the years ahead. Nova Pay will transition gradually into your stewardship. Piece by piece, not as a gift, but as something you've earned." Tears flickered in his eyes. He shook his head. "Dad, I don't deserve this. Not yet. I mocked you. I doubted you. I reached across the desk and placed my hand on his shoulder. "Nathan, we all mock what we don't understand. I did the same to my father once. What matters isn't where you started. What matters is the man you've become." You've shown humility, integrity, courage. And those, son, are worth more than any valuation or boardroom deal. For a long while, silence hung between us, broken only by the hum of the city outside. Finally, Nathan closed the folder and whispered, "I'll protect this. I swear to you, Dad. Not for me. For us. For what you built." I smiled then, my chest warm, my heart lighter than it had felt in decades. "You'll do more than protect it, Nathan. You'll grow it. And when you hold this old, cracked phone someday, you'll remember, not the shame of obsolete plastic, but the story of how everything began." His laughter broke through his tears. He stood, and for the first time in years, he hugged me, not casually, not half-heartedly, but with the full weight of a son who finally understood his father. At that moment, I knew I had given him something greater than a company worth millions. I had given him legacy. I had given him perspective. It didn't take long before Nathan's promise was tested. Legacy is not a gift you place in a vault, it's a fire that must be kept alive in the winds of change. 2 months after placing the inheritance plan in his hands, NovaPay faced one of its biggest opportunities and greatest risks. A major East Coast bank approached us with a proposal: expand NovaPay's digital platform into their system nationwide. If successful, it would catapult the company from millions to the doorstep of billions. But if it failed, the losses could cripple us for years. The boardroom was split. Some wanted to seize the chance immediately, hungry for growth, intoxicated by ambition. Others urged caution, warning of overreach. I listened quietly, letting them argue, my hands folded, my gaze steady. And then, Nathan rose from his chair. At first, a few board members smirked. He was still new to them, still the kid. But then he began to speak. "We can't treat this like a gamble," Nathan said firmly. "It's not about greed, and it's not about fear. Expanding too fast could break what makes NovaPay special. Customers trust us because we keep things simple, reliable, honest. If scaling compromises that, we lose everything." He paused, opening that ever-present notebook of his. He laid down hand-drawn diagrams, customer behavior charts, technical breakdowns, months of quiet observations he'd been documenting while working the ground floor. "We can expand," he continued, "but only if we roll out in phases. City by city. Test, refine, strengthen the system before flooding it nationwide. It's slower. But it's safer. And it honors what this company was built on, patience and foundations that last." The room went silent. Even the skeptics, even the ambitious ones with restless eyes, leaned back and nodded slightly. One board member finally turned to me. "Jonathan, this sounds like you. Did you prepare him for this?" I smiled faintly. "No. I didn't prepare him. He prepared himself." That was the day Nathan's voice held true weight in the company, not because he was my son, but because he was becoming a leader in his own right. The board approved his phased plan. Months later, when the rollout succeeded with strength and stability, the very same members who once doubted him now praised his foresight. Watching from a distance, I felt pride unlike anything a balance sheet could provide. For years I had protected NovaPay like a fragile sapling, shielding it from the winds. Now, at last, I saw it become a tree strong enough to weather storms, and my son was the one tending its roots. The boy who once mocked my old phone had grown into the man who could guide an empire. And yet, deeper still, I felt something far more personal. For the first time, Nathan no longer felt like just my heir. He felt like my partner. It's a peculiar thing, growing older. For decades you imagine yourself as the teacher, the compass, the forward scout clearing paths for the next generation. You cling to that role so tightly that the day your own son teaches you something feels almost surreal. For me, that day came one rainy Friday in Seattle. Nathan and I were sitting in the office late, the kind of hour when emails had stopped, the building lights dimmed, but ideas still hummed like quiet electricity. I was bent over reports, reviewing numbers with my usual careful eye. "Dad," Nathan said softly, closing his notebook for once, "can I tell you something?" I set the papers aside. "Of course." He leaned forward, his voice thoughtful in a way I hadn't often heard before. "You've always built things to last. That's what you've taught me. Strong roots, patience, legacy. And I get it. But the world I grew up in moves differently. People my age, they don't always wait. They don't always trust giants, they trust speed, accessibility, connection. If we want NovaPay to be more than stable, if we want it to thrive, we'll need to embrace that too. We can't only think like builders of the past. We need to think like connectors of the future." I listened quietly, studying him. His words weren't arrogance this time, they were vision. He continued, "I'm not saying we throw away what you've built. I'm saying we add to it. Mobile-first systems designed with transparency. Instant transactions, yes, but also instant communication. Social trust. Global outreach. NovaPay can be more than reliable, it can be the most human tech company in the room." There it was, the same fire I had once carried in my chest when no one believed in me. But it burned in him with a different hue. And in that moment, I realized, yes, I had been the builder of roots. But my son, he was the dreamer of wings. I smiled slowly. "You know, Nathan," I said, "when you mocked my old phone, you weren't entirely wrong. I have been behind the times in some ways. My strength was building. Yours might be flying." His eyes lit up, surprised. "So, you agree?" "I do," I admitted. NovaPay's future shouldn't be a museum to my methods. It should be a bridge between generations. My roots. Your wings. He exhaled, nodding, and for the first time, I felt the true harmony of our bond, not teacher and student, not father and foolish son, but two visionaries standing on different sides of the same timeline. For the first time, Nathan had not only followed my legacy, he had reshaped it. And I had never been prouder to listen. There comes a point in every father's life when the burden of years presses harder than ambition, and you realize that your greatest role is not to lead, but to hand over the reins. For me, that realization crept in quietly. I felt it during long board meetings when my energy waned faster than it once did. I noticed it when I paused before signing a decisive contract, not because I lacked understanding, but because the fire of urgency no longer burned the way it had. It wasn't defeat, it was nature. And Nathan, my son, was ready. I began preparing him step by step. Not in secret, not hastily, but with deliberate care. He shadowed me in negotiations, not as the silent observer but as the one asking questions, pushing back, holding his ground against seasoned investors twice his age. At dinners with partners, I let him sit in the middle seat, answering queries while I stayed quiet, listening. Gradually, I let the world's eyes shift from Jonathan Reed to Nathan Reed. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when my pride pulled me back, whispering, "They still need you. You're still the man who built this." Letting go, I learned, was a discipline more painful than building. One evening, after a particularly heavy day of meetings, I found myself sitting in the empty office, staring out at the shimmering city lights over Puget Sound. Nathan entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one beside me and sat across the desk. "You're tired," he said gently. Not as a question, but a statement. I nodded. More than I admit sometimes. He leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Dad, you don't have to carry it alone anymore." I studied him, his steady eyes, his strong jaw, his presence that no longer leaned on mine for support. My heart clenched with pride and ache all at once. I remembered him as the boy with messy hair and a mocking laugh, dismissing my cracked phone. And now, here he was, a man ready to carry the weight I had once shouldered alone. "You're right," I whispered. And for the first time in decades, I felt the strange freedom of loosening my grip. The transition would not happen in a day, or a week. But from that evening onward, I knew NovaPay's heartbeat would not skip if mine slowed. My son's hands were on the pulse now. It was time to teach him not more lessons, but one final truth, that leadership isn't possession. It's stewardship. And he was ready. The day came sooner than I expected. We had scheduled an all-hands meeting at headquarters, a gathering that usually meant quarterly updates and forward-looking roadmaps. But this time, I knew it would be different. This time, the announcement would mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As I stood backstage, I felt the weight of decades pressing on my shoulders. I had faced investors who wanted to tear the company apart, competitors who tried to bury us in lawsuits, hackers who tested every inch of our firewalls. Those battles had never shaken me. But this, handing the legacy of my life's work to my own son, this had me trembling. The crowd was large, hundreds of employees seated in rows, faces illuminated under stage lights. I walked to the podium, slow and deliberate, that cracked old phone still in my pocket like a good luck charm. "Good morning," I began, clearing my throat. 14 years ago, NovaPay was an idea scribbled into a notebook, tested on a phone so outdated my son used to laugh at it. Many of you know how far we've come since then. But progress is not meant to be guarded by one man forever. Progress belongs to those who will keep carrying it forward. I paused. Across the room, Nathan sat quietly in the front row. He didn't know exactly when I would make the announcement, but he felt it coming. His jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on mine. "And so today," I continued, "I want every one of you to know, NovaPay is no longer the story of Jonathan Reed alone. It never was, truthfully. It is a story that will now turn its page. With pride, I want to introduce to you the man who has shown integrity, humility, and vision even greater than my own." I extended my hand toward him. My son, Nathan Reed. For a moment, silence. Then, waves of applause thundered through the room. Nathan stood slowly, visibly stunned, the flush of both pride and disbelief on his face. He approached the podium, and I stepped aside, letting him stand in the light that no longer belonged only to me. He looked at the sea of faces, then back at me. I gave him the smallest of nods. Now was his moment. "My father built NovaPay from nothing," Nathan began, his voice steady though I knew his heart was racing. "And though he calls me the future, I want to make one thing clear, I am not here to replace him. I am here to continue him. Every system, every call heard in support, every late-night fix, every note in this," he held up his old, worn notebook for the crowd to see, "was built on the foundation of patience and honesty this man created." The applause rose louder. And for the first time, I saw my son not as my heir, but as the leader NovaPay deserved. The boy who once mocked my phone now stood at the center of an empire he had earned. As I stepped back into the shadows of the stage, I felt tears prick my eyes. This was not the loss of authority, but the triumph of legacy. I had never been prouder. After the announcement, my life took on a different rhythm. Days that were once consumed by relentless meetings, contracts, and late-night decisions began to breathe again. I found myself walking through parks in Seattle with no agenda, sipping coffee without rushing to a call, even dusting off books I'd left untouched for years. And yet, there was no emptiness in me. Because I knew our company, was in safe hands. Nathan rose into his role faster than even I imagined. Employees respected him not because he was my son, but because he had earned their trust. He led with integrity, and when he spoke about the future of NovaPay, I recognized echoes of myself, steady, uncompromising, mixed with something new, something distinctly his. His wings. One evening, back at the house, Nathan joined me on the porch. He sat quietly for a while, then glanced at the battered old phone I still carried in my pocket. "You know, Dad," he chuckled softly, "I don't think I'll ever laugh at that phone again." I smiled, watching the Seattle skyline shimmer in the distance. Good. Because one day, when people ask you how it all began, you'll show them this old thing. And you'll remind them that greatness doesn't start with the latest gadget, it starts with vision, discipline, and faith. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached over, squeezing my shoulder the way sons rarely do unless words aren't enough. In that moment, I realized the mocking had long since faded. What remained was respect. What remained was love. I hadn't just built a company worth millions. I had built something far rarer. I had built understanding between father and son. And as I watched Nathan look out at the horizon, notebook in hand, I knew he would carry both the roots and the wings. The future was his, and for the first time, I was at peace letting it be so. The empire was never about the phone. It was always about the legacy.